Chris and Noah Webb. Make them very welcome. They've done a great job coming here. That was pretty much a last-minute effort on Chris's part to write those protest songs, so they've done a great job to come in here. And I'll tell you what, if listening to 1,500, 2,000 bikes roll up here this morning doesn't make your heart swell, you're either clinically dead or you're a member of Campbell Newman's cabinet. It probably wasn't just my heart that was swelling too, if I'm perfectly honest. Seriously guys, well done, great effort getting everyone here today. It's been fantastic. The amount of support that we've received has just made me immensely proud to be a Queenslander and to be a person who's on the side of liberty today. Just by getting out of bed, standing shoulder to shoulder with all your brothers and sisters today, you've shown that we're here, we're united, we're mad as all hell, and we're not going to take these bullshit laws lying down. I'm quite reminded today of another group, nigh on 150 years ago, that also stood shoulder to shoulder against the tyrannical government. On December 1st in 1854 at Bakery Hill down near Ballarat, Peter Layla and a group of rebels hoisted a flag that many of us are wearing today, and a flag that a lot of us have used as a symbol of brotherhood, of freedom and of individual liberty. They swore an oath on that day to that flag to consecrate it, and I'd like to start off today if all of us could repeat and re-swear that oath. Now there should be a few signs around with that oath on it, but it's a pretty simple one, so if you all just follow along, nice and loud. We swear.
We swear.
By the Southern Cross.
By the Southern Cross.
To stand truly by each other.
To stand truly by each other.
And to fight to defend our rights and liberties.
And to fight to defend our rights and liberties.
That's what I wanted to hear. My name's Jay Buckley. I'll be making sure everything runs to plan today. We've got a few speakers to get through, so I'll give them a bit of a poke with a stick if they go over time. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge our Indigenous brothers and sisters who've been putting up with the government's boots on their necks for a long time, with particular respect for the Jagera, Turrbal, Jinnaburra and Gubbi Gubbi people whose land we're standing on at the moment. Just a bit of housekeeping stuff. There's toilets over the back to the north, about 400 metres, and toilets over to my right, left of stage, about 300 metres, if anybody needs to look. I wouldn't go in there, it stinks. You'll have noticed that our friends from Queensland Police are here, and they've been helping with directing traffic. Let's give them the most boring Sunday morning they've had in their lives. They just want the same thing that everybody else wants, and that's to get home to their families today with the minimum amount of fuss and bother. Before we get started with all the main speakers, I'll introduce you to a fellow called Paul Keyworth. Paul's been starting up the Motorcycle Australia Party, so he's just got a few things to say about providing a voice for motorcyclists in the Australian Parliament. So I'll let Troy tell you a little bit about what he's doing and what's involved there. Are you around, Troy? Paul, at the moment? Sorry, I don't know why I was calling you Troy.
Sound check, 1, 2.
It's too hard. Hit. There you go, bro.
G'day everybody. Look, first I'd like you all to give yourselves a round of applause for turning up. Who said Queenslanders were apathetic? This is the state of origin and Campbell Newman is New South Wales. As Gabe said, after the last federal election I decided to start a political party called the Motorcyclist Australia Party. Still trying to get the remainder of the 500 signatures needed. We've got some guys with boards. Anyone who's registered and enrolled to vote, if they sign up for us, we can get this party started. What we have to bear in mind is that this is the thin end of the wedge. These laws are not against one percenters, they're not against motorcyclists, they're against all Queenslanders. These are repressive, and I lived through the Joe era, and this is bullshit. You know, this is Joe revisited Redux by 2. And for those of you who are in the CQEB disputes, we know what's coming. G20's on the way, and this is about cracking heads. Don't think the QPS is the enemy, they're not. They've been instructed to deliver an edict by a dictator who has gotten right out of control. Unfortunately, some of us elected him, but I don't think anybody knew what was in store. Well, that's on the way, mate. I mean, we've got no security in this parliament. Labor were dead ducks for years and years. They did fuck all about it. There's no Bill of Rights. There's nothing to protect your rights. And we're in together, and it's heartening to see not just motorcyclists turn up here today, but mainstream Queenslanders who said enough's enough. This... We want to acknowledge all the positive things that motorcyclists do. Blood runs, tour runs. And I don't want to hear people parking their bikes because they're fearful of being harassed. Get your bikes out of the sheds, ride and enjoy. Ride down and take it. And this is Campbell's Christmas present from the tour run. Anybody want to give it to him? Alright, thanks a lot everybody, and if you could see people going around with these petitions, if you could sign them as Queenslanders. We've had enough. Thanks, Paul.
Now, I haven't cited my first speaker yet, so we might be doing a bit of a shuffle with the running order. Michael Cope, are you around yet? Michael? Our first speaker for the day, Michael Cope, is the President of the Queensland Council for Civil Liberties. He's a member of the Queensland Law Society, volunteers down at the Caxton Legal Centre. He's a member of Amnesty International, including at one time serving as the coordinator for the Australian Capital Territory and Southern New South Wales Legal Network. He's a solicitor to the High Court of Australia. Michael's written articles in The Garden that are highly critical of these laws, and he's kindly offered up his Sunday morning to come and speak to us today. Please welcome Michael Cope.
Thank you very much. It's very good to see so many people out here on this very important issue. And we need to start this discussion by understanding that these laws, as has already been said, but need to be repeated on and on and on, are not just about bikies. The Vlad Act mentions bikies nowhere. The Criminal Organisation Disruption Act has a list of organisations said to be bikie organisations in the back, but the operative bits of the Act apply to anybody and everybody, which means that any organisation by a stroke of the pen can be added to the list at the back of the Act. So from the civil liberties point of view, when we look at laws, we ask a number of questions. The first question we ask is, are the laws necessary? We say there was no need for these laws. The incident which started all of this off on the Gold Coast resulted in 18 people being arrested and charged and are currently going through the courts. The real problem on the Gold Coast was not a lack of power, but a lack of police, demonstrated by the fact that Campbell Newman was able to pull $20 million out of his back pocket to try and solve the problem. A problem which the police union have been complaining about for some considerable period of time. The annual report of the Crime and Misconduct Commission was released in September, just a few weeks before all this blew up. It mentions bikie gangs, or organised criminal motorcycle outlaw motorcycle gangs, whatever they call them, 3 times in 122 pages, hardly suggesting that the CMC thought this was a serious issue, despite the recent interventions of its chair. The reality is that Queensland Police over the last few years have been given enormous increased powers to deal with organised crime. The Criminal Organisation Act was introduced in 2009 by the previous government. So far it has had only one case which is still going on. At least under that Act, the police had to go before a judge and convince the judge that the organisation was a criminal organisation. It's not a decision being made by the Parliament or by the Attorney General. Police in Queensland recently got the power to phone tap. The Queensland Government introduced early this year, confiscation of profits legislation, which is the most draconian of its type in the country. None of that legislation has been effectively put to use. It has not been proved to be ineffective. But even if it is demonstrated that the laws were necessary, which we don't accept, are they proportionate? Are they reasonable? We say not. It's one of the fundamental principles of our legal system that people are dealt with on the basis of what they have done, not who they know, not to organisation of which they are a member, not who they associate with. Once you go down that track, which is in fundamental violation of the right to freedom of association, you undercut one of the fundamental freedoms of our society. The problem with these laws is that who is a criminal organisation, who is not a criminal organisation, who is a criminal, is to be decided by the government and not in accordance with the principles of rule of law. Whether you get your organisation stuck in the back of the Act will be determined by who is in the government. Our liberty should not be depend on whether or not people in government are saints or sinners or anything else. It should depend on the rule of law. And we've already seen many examples of how these sort of laws slip inevitably will catch innocent people. We've seen the poor bloke who was harassed because he was wearing a Sons of Anarchy t-shirt. We've seen the police invite people to register them when they want to go for a ride on a Sunday morning. I mean, if you're going to have these sort of things, that's the sort of steps you're going to have to take. Why should people be required to register the police when they simply want to go out for a ride or a drive or anything else on a Sunday morning? And it's, as I said, it's not just bikies because they barely get a mention. You could be a member of the local bowls club or the golf club. You could get involved in an altercation trying to remove an unruly member from the club. You could get charged with wounding, and wounding simply means that you break a person's skin. You are potentially being charged under the Vlad Act because you've done it as a participant in an association, namely the Bowls Club, and you get an extra 15 years. If you are the president or the secretary or the treasurer of the Bowls Club, you get an extra 25. The central problem with these sort of legislation, as I've said, is that it criminalises people just on the basis of organisations of which they are a member. And the expert analysis of these sort of criminal organisations is that mostly there's a small group of people who are conducting these activities, and when these sort of laws are brought in, these people go and hide and the other people leave the organisation. So that inevitably results in the need to expand the legislation, which is what we've already seen. We've seen the laws relating to bail changed so that people who have left these organisations and can demonstrate that they have will still be subject to not being able to, they'll still be subject to the position where they'll have to establish that they're entitled to bail rather than the other way around. We've also seen, and it's appropriate since we're on a Liberal Democratic Party platform, that this government, which is allegedly in favour of free markets and free enterprise, has decided to introduce laws to stop people from conducting their ordinary business. These laws which prevent members of these organisations from being sparkies and plumbers and all sorts of other things. It's a rather strange piece of logic which says that your sparky or plumber has to go through a probity check to go in your house. On that sort of logic, you know, you'd be having your Avon lady or the Mormons or somebody else go for a probity check to make sure they can come into your house. It's very bizarre. Then, of course, the government has had to shut down the Crime and Misconduct Committee, essentially for doing its job. It's rather odd to accuse a committee which the chairperson is a Conservative independent of being biased. In fact, it seems that her only mistake was to, in fact, do her job in a non-partisan fashion. It seems to us that the Premier has made much of this as an attempt to advance the war on drugs. It's our view that the war on drugs, along with all these other wars, the war on bikies, the war on terror, All of these wars are just wars on civil liberties. Every one of these wars is a war without end, and as George Orwell pointed out in 1984, a war without end results in the endless suspension of civil liberties. It's about time that we look back at dealing with drugs by treating them as a health issue and by decriminalising their possession and use. That would also result in a fundamental undermining of the business model of these organised crime groups. As I said, it's fantastic to see so many people out here on such an important civil liberties issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Our next speaker is David Lionhelm. David has had an interest in politics since the early 70s, where he worked to help end military conscription. He retired from the Liberal Party in disgust over John Howard's gun laws in 1996. He's written extensively for a number of publications with a heavy focus on individual and property rights. He owns a successful agribusiness consulting company in Sydney, former veterinarian. He also has degrees in business and law. He's a sporting shooter, and just recently he was elected to become Senator for New South Wales, becoming the first Liberal Democrat's first Member of Parliament when he takes his seat next year. He rides a Triumph Speed Triple 1050. Please make him welcome Senator-elect David Lionhelm.
Thanks, Dave. Good morning, everyone. I hope you understand there's a difference between the Liberal Democratic Party and the Liberal National Party. We're the party of freedom, we're not the Liberal Nazi Party. I'm here today to reassure you that there are still politicians who value liberty. I ride a motorbike, I'm a politician, and I'm deeply worried about these laws. The fuss about so-called motorcycle gangs is called a moral panic. And moral panics are not new. I looked up Wikipedia just to check what it's had to say, and apparently they can be traced back to 1840. There have been tens of thousands of moral panics over the years. There have been moral panics about communists, Catholics, Jews, Muslims, homosexuals and Asians. There have been moral panics about satanic rituals, Falun Gong, Scientology, the Exclusive Brethren, drug dealers and pedophiles. A fairly recent moral panic occurred over date rape drugs, and there's now a moral panic in Sydney going on over king hits. In most cases, there's an identifiable group of people who are vilified. They're singled out as a group by the police, and fairly often new legislation is aimed at them. And nearly every time, the new legislation makes things worse, and we all lose a little bit of our freedom. What the Queensland Government has done with this moral panic is more troubling than usual. When it gets over the panic and moves on to the next bogeyman, we'll be left with laws that can be used against anyone to undermine fundamental liberties and damage the independence of our judicial system. I'm sure, as you've been told before, you know that the laws don't refer to bikies. They refer to vicious, lawless associates. Now that can be anyone convicted of even fairly minor offences who has current or past association with any group. People classified as vicious, lawless associates face mandatory 15 or 25 years in jail on top of whatever else they would receive, even if that sentence was just a fine or a community-based order. People imprisoned under these laws cannot get parole unless they turn informer. Let me make a prediction. A police officer will die because of this law. If you are indeed criminally inclined and facing a 25-year mandatory sentence for a fairly minor crime like dangerous driving or fighting in public, and you belong to a motorbike club, you might as well go down for murder as for the lesser crime. The sentence is no different, and there might be no witnesses. The new laws also reverse the burden of proof and undermines one of the cornerstones of a free society. You have to prove You are not a vicious, lawless associate. They refer to criminal organisations. And as Michael previously told you, any organisation, whether it's a motorbike club, a trade union, a rival political party, or the seniors down at the local bowls club, can be declared criminal on the advice of the Minister for any reason he considers relevant. A participant in a declared criminal organisation who is present in a public place with 2 or more participants is liable for up to 3 years jail. It's also an offence for members to attend prescribed events or places, again determined by the Minister. Police can stop, search and detain a member for questioning at any time. Refusing to answer questions carries a penalty of 5 years in prison. You might have committed no crime whatsoever, but if you're under suspicion and simply stay silent, you could go to jail. 26 motorcycle clubs have already been declared criminal organisations, including one that doesn't even exist. The government says it will establish a separate prison for convicted bikies where they'll wear pink suits and be locked in their cells for 23 hours a day and denied television and exercise equipment. All it needs is waterboarding, and it's Queensland version of Guantanamo Bay. These laws have been sold to the public as highly targeted legislation designed to tackle organised crime. The Premier says police will not harass or intimidate law-abiding riders. And riders have been told to ring a police hotline if they want to ride in groups of 3 or more in peace. And as you know, the reality is very different. Non-declared clubs have been raided, including the Vietnam veterans, and there are numerous stories, and I'm sure you know better than me, of innocent motorcyclists being stopped and searched without justification. Hard-working, tax-paying members of clubs have been